Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to Doctor Who, the classic series Action Figures A History. In the 13th episode of this series, we're going to be taking a look at arguably the two things that make Doctor Who Doctor Who. Lots of variants of Doctors, and of course, lots of variants of Dalek. As in the 13th episode of this series, we're going to be taking a look at the 13 Doctors set, the Sound Effects Daleks Range Wave 2, the Night of the Doctor 8th Doctor, the Silver Nemesis variation of Ace, as well as discussing some of the 4th Doctor action figures that at this point within the line were in fact available to be purchased in America directly. In this episode, we will also be delving into the world of the B&M Doctor Who action figure collector sets, with the first release as a part of that series being the 4th Doctor, released alongside the Decade Master, as well as Vok Robot D84. So as per usual, I hope you enjoy the episode, and do of course stay tuned for more episodes as a part of this series, along with other Doctor Who content on the Host Productions each and every week. The first wave of Doctor Who sound effects Daleks were released in 2012. In all, there were 6 Daleks to collect. 5 of them were Classic Series Daleks, and the 6th was a new series Bronze Dalek. I have already covered the 5 Classic Series Daleks as a part of this series already. Rather unusually, it would take a whole 2 years to see another wave of sound effects Daleks being released. I think, recalling back to the time, we were always promised a second wave was on the cards. However, it did take a rather long time to materialise, and here we are in 2014 with a rather reduced wave of sound effects Daleks, this time round only featuring 4 Classic Series ones as opposed to the usual 6. Rather excitingly though, however, we do have a reissue of the Remembrance of the Daleks Special Weapons Dalek, something of which that back in the day was highly sought after by collectors due to it being a very unique Dalek, not sharing a sculpt with any other Dalek that has been released as a part of the series, and to this day even the sound effects Dalek does in fact remain rather popular, along with the rest of this wave, as I do believe this series was exclusive to Forbidden Planet compared to the first wave of sound effects Daleks being available on general sale in other stores the likes of Amazon, Argos and even Toys R Us. This time round we get to see a Dead Planet Dalek, a Special Weapons Dalek, a Chase Guard Dalek and a Genesis Dalek, and as an instant disclaimer, although it may look like it, these Daleks are not the sound effects Daleks. The only one that is this one right here, as back in the day of 2014, that Dalek is the only one that I picked up as a kid because it was the most strikingly and visibly different compared to all of the others, having already got the original Special Weapons Dalek and having already got the 2 Dead Planet and Genesis Daleks as a part of Dalek Collector Set 1. Meaning, in order to showcase these Daleks as a part of this series, I'm going to be relying on images kindly contributed by Macaulay Carnes to take a look at the actual wave itself, as opposed to these Daleks that are kindly standing in. So taking a look at the one figure of the wave that I did actually decide to pick up myself, it is the Chase Dalek. Now this Dalek has a very unusual history behind it because of course it's not your regular 1960s Doctor Who Dalek, and it looks very familiar to the one as seen within the Peter Cushing movies, and that is because it is a Peter Cushing movie Dalek prop that was brought over to the Doctor Who studio and borrowed for filming in the Chase, and naturally Character Options know how much Doctor Who fans want to see some Peter Cushing movie Daleks released. However, of course, the Peter Cushing films were not BBC made, they were made by another company, and therefore they do not have the license to make them. So this Dalek is the equivalent of a Doctor Who legal loophole, which naturally, being a law student, I absolutely love it. They can legally produce this Dalek without getting attacked by any courts or by breaking the law, as it has actually appeared within Doctor Who, be it in the background in the scene, but it did still feature, so we are still allowed to see it released as a part of the line. So this Dalek does feature your regular 60s fin fender, and we do also have the skirt section which has been painted in a silver, along with the darker blue hemispheres of the Peter Cushing movies. Then we have the mid section, which this time round has been coated in a rather lovely looking golden paint, stands out on the silver background. The barrel section is exactly the same to usual, and the main difference is of course the big blue dome at the very top, which has been painted very nicely in a rather glossy colour. And of course, much like the other sound effects Daleks Daleks released from the 60s line, we do also have the inclusion of the brand new earbulbs, which have been sculpted in a transparent yellow plastic. As for the eye stalk, this has also seen a little bit of an upgrade. It is longer and silver, and does feature some circular pale blue discs as opposed to the other darker blue discs seen on the 60s Daleks throughout this period in Doctor Who history. As per usual, of course, it does also feature your regular 60s Dalek gun, your regular Dalek manipulator arm. I would have absolutely loved if this Dalek within the TV show actually featured the claw, because then they could still get away with it, and then we would have a Dalek even more like the one as seen in the movie. But hey, if you're into customising, you could probably do that yourself. And naturally, due to this being a part of the Sound Effects Daleks range, by clicking one of the hemispheres on the skirt, it does release your usual 60s Dalek sound chip sounds.
Daleks will destroy all life. Exterminate.
And all of that usual jargon that no doubt you've heard many, many times before. So a massive thank you to Character Options for being very intelligent and cunning, because with their help we finally get to see a Peter Cushing movie Dalek in the 5.5 Collector series. Next up, we return to the 1960s with the original Dead Planet Dalek. This is of course the same old silver and blue design that we have seen on multiple occasions already throughout this series, and it is mostly identical to the Dalek released as a part of Dalek Collector Set 1, aside from the obvious difference of course being the electronics on the inside, the sound effects, as well as the button featured on the skirt. There is also some paint application changes to the plunger, which now has a matte finish. The eye stalk also has a few changes, including spaced out discs on the eye stalk itself, as opposed to the solid lump of discs that we've seen on the original version. Once again, the tip of the eye stalk now features a matte black eye finish, as opposed to the glossy black seen on the original. The Genesis Dalek is very similar to the Planet of the Daleks Dalek, released within the original wave of Sound Effects Daleks a few years previous, featuring a rather similar colour scheme and base colour of the darker grey. The fender, however, this time round has been divided into two sections, once again featuring the darker grey, but also a black band running around the bottom. There is also a wash that has been applied to the midsection of mesh to make it look more like metal in between the slats. The gun is also now painted as silver, along with the arm of the plunger also being painted as silver compared to the darker grey on the Planet Dalek. And finally, the dome lights on the top have been given a frosted paint application finish. Once again, this Dalek would receive exactly the same sound chip compared to the other 1970s Daleks released as a part of the range. The Special Weapons Dalek is the same unique sculpt seen within the original Remembrance of the Daleks collector set, now with the electronics added inside. The gold sections have been moulded in a seemingly more bronze shade of plastic, with less wash applied over the top. I personally quite like the weathering seen on the original version, as it does look ever so slightly more natural. The SFX variation is in fact quite ugly, with a thicker weathering applied over the top, which quite frankly looks like it has been drawn on with felt tip. I'm very happy that I've got the original version, and I never quite noticed how bad the weathering on the second variation is up until revisiting this figure as a part of this series. The large gun also now has a silver wash applied over the top, bringing out further rivets and details within the gun itself, which is in fact a decent improvement compared to the original version, which just had the gun sculpted in black plastic with no wash applied over the top. The body of the Dalek also appears to be more vibrantly white due to the lack in grey dirt wash applied over the top. The sound effects chip for this Dalek is different to all of the other Daleks released as a part of this series, featuring a blaster and explosion sound effect, along with some secret sounds which can be accessed by turning the Dalek off, then on again, and then double clicking the main button featured on the skirt as per usual. The Sound Effects Daleks Range Wave 2 made for a good opportunity to pick up some of the earlier Dalek designs released as a part of the range, most notably the Genesis and Dead Planet Dalek. However, the focus for the vast majority of collectors was on the brilliant Chase Guard Dalek variant, being the closest we'll ever get to a Peter Cushing movie Dalek, and of course the long-awaited re-release of the Special Weapons Remembrance Dalek. But that said, due to the electronics and sound effects, Daleks, the recommended retail for this series was around £15 to £20. They weren't necessarily accessible to the fans who collected Doctor Who action figures here and there, and were rightfully considered pretty expensive. Looking back years later, this range also seems to be considerably rare and collectible, possibly suggesting that the production run on this line was considerably low. Given the time it taken to see this range hit the shelves compared to that of Wave 1, plus the multiple other Daleks originally planned to be a part of this series from pretty much all of the Supreme Daleks previously released as a part of the classic line, as well as including the Ironside and Paradigm Drone Dalek, I think it was no surprise that this series never returned for a third instalment, sadly, but who knows, the sculpt and sound chips still exist, so maybe one day that may change and we may see future sound effects Daleks released. However, only time will tell, but at this current moment I think it's unlikely. And after the January Forbidden Planet exclusive releases alongside the second wave of sound effects Daleks, this is the moment where we enter a little bit of a void, because for several months we don't see any Classic Series action figure releases. No re-releases, no variants, no nothing. And I think at this moment, Classic Series Doctor Who figure collectors got a little bit worried indeed. And then finally, the silence of 2014 was broken. After many months away, we see another variant of Ace being released, of course as portrayed by Sophie Aldred, however a different figure, not from Remembrance of the Daleks, however this time round, Silver Nemesis, seeing a brand new series of accessories alongside the figure, and a few variations to the figure itself. Out of both of the figures, this is the one that is the most common to find, and I think that you could probably find this variant for quite close to its recommended retail online still to this day. So taking a closer look at the costume, even though this is a re-release, it still doesn't change the fact that this is an excellently detailed figure. As per usual, we do have a series of badges on the bomber jacket itself, and a few slight variations this time round, along with a few badges being removed. Most notably, there is the inclusion of this little curly badge at the very top, which I do believe Ace acquires in British Show of the Galaxy, which is a really lovely inclusion, and also on the actual body itself of the figure, we now have the inclusion of this little belt buckle piece, as well as a slight dot on the lower half of the shirt. Not only that, the actual shirt underneath the body, which we'll be taking a closer look at in a second, is in fact entirely different from the original version. And of course the other major difference is that the bomber jacket now features a brand new sculpt on the arms. This time round the figure variation does in fact have the sleeves rolled up, meaning that we do have exposure of the arms underneath, and as well as a few badges included on the not so rolled up parts of the bomber jacket on the arm sections. As per usual, we have the normal detailing of the watch on the side, and exactly the same hand detailing sculpt seen on the previous release. The bottom half of the costume is still pretty much the same as the original, including the skirt as well as the black tights, and of course the shoes at the very bottom. However, the most noticeable change on this is that on the sides of the tights, we now have the inclusion of a red jagged line seen throughout the Silver Nemesis costume that also wasn't present on the original Remembrance of the Daleks release. Taking a look at the likeness to Sophie Aldred, once again this is a nice sculpt, however unfortunately the paint application over the top of this is once again a little bit thick and sloppy. I don't know what it is with the Ace head, and I don't know why they just can't paint it like all of the other Doctor Who Classic Series action figures, but this one just always needs to have a thick paint application. I don't quite know why. We do also have a slight alteration to the retool on the head itself. Ace now does of course feature a slightly droopy earring at the side, as opposed to the regular stud seen on the Remembrance of the Daleks figure. And also the most noticeable difference on the head sculpt is the inclusion of a ponytail on the back of the head, as opposed to the braid piece seen on the Remembrance of the Daleks version. And then of course coming back round to the front, we have a nice likeness to Sophie Aldred, however unfortunately the paint application just isn't as good. It's a little bit better than the original, but it still just looks a bit off. Much like the previous release, the Ace figure does come with some rather different and unusual accessories, the first of which is a portrait of Sophie Aldred in a rather lovely Victorian frock, of course a rather dated picture, with a goldenish silvery frame around the side. Now the unusual thing about this is that from what I understand, this photo, or at least this painting, was in fact taken from a deleted scene within Silver Nemesis, so it doesn't in fact feature within the full-length version of the story that aired on on TV, so it's kind of a very niche area of Doctor Who fan knowledge. However, it's nice to see it recreated in action figure form. And of course, even though Remembrance of the Daleks Ace did come with a massive amount of accessories, there was still one accessory missing that Ace did of course use in the early half of Remembrance of the Daleks, when the Doctor and her first arrived outside Coal Hill School, and that was of course her massive beatbox. This one is a little bit different this time round. It's a bit more futuristic and alien in its design, and of course Ace does use this in the early half of Silver Nemesis, and possibly even throughout the story as well. I can't quite recall, I've not seen Silver Nemesis in quite a long time. However, there is some really nice and sharp paint detailing on this, including a silver paint app to bring out some of the details, and some more intricate details as well, even including some colour on the many different buttons and the red dials around the side. We do also have a strap on this, meaning that it can be wrapped around the figure's shoulder, which is a really nice touch. Much like the previous Ace figure, there is also the option to completely remove the arms to be able to have a jacketless version to give a better look at the shirt underneath, which is exactly the same procedure as last time, meaning that the coat can prop off and then you can have the other arms added on top, which are exactly the same sculpt to the original figure. The shirt itself is a rather similar style to the one seen on the previous release, however the detailing over the top isn't as sharp as the original version. Just sliding back in the original one to take a look at that, as you can see it's a cool themed top, and generally there's this black outline that is used on the detailing itself to really bring out the different shapes, and this of course isn't seen on this version. However, it is still a nice display choice. I think that considering the original Ace figure was of course the SDCC exclusive of 2013, and naturally because of that the original figure would have been quite hard to come by this point, and still kind of currently is to this day, it is nice for collectors to have another opportunity to add Ace to their collection if they didn't manage to get the original version. But for those collectors who did manage to get the original and also want to get this second version, there is enough variation and difference to make this product worth buying. So overall an okay figure, and naturally it's nice to see another Ace to add to the collection. As sad as it is that Ace from Silver Nemesis is the final ever Character Options and Underground Toys Forbidden Planet exclusive Doctor Who Classic Series release, it feels kind of fitting that both Classic Series Doctor Who on TV and the Classic Series Forbidden Planet exclusive line of Doctor Who action figures are both ending off with Ace, walking away into the distance with the 7th Doctor.
Come on, Ace. We've got work to do.
Now, I was originally debating whether or not to feature this figure within this series, and it is of course the Night of the Doctor, 8th Doctor, from the 2013 minisode Night of the Doctor that was of course released just before the 50th anniversary special Day of the Doctor, featuring the return of Paul McGann. However, because it is a Paul McGann figure, and because it is the 8th Doctor, who does primarily belong within the classic series, it only kind of felt right to feature this figure within this series, because it is another variant of McGann, and without it I kind of wouldn't be covering every single variant of each classic Doctor. Therefore, I'm featuring it. Deal with it. Now, of course, the Night of the Doctor 8th Doctor costume is a major departure from the previous 8th Doctor action figure that we have seen within the series. There is no longer the long curls or the Edwardian costume. It has now been replaced by a Time War ravaged 8th Doctor with a rather steampunky yet still cool looking costume. Starting off at the very top, we have the lovely inclusion of the blue neckerchief, and this goes down to an open shirt piece, that brilliant waistcoat in the very middle, almost bronzish style paint app, including buttons going down the middle and a darker wash over this, even including a chain coming off to the side. Moving down the figure, we do also have the inclusion of what look like leather trousers, almost very similar, or maybe even hinting at the next incarnation, being of course the War Doctor. And then at the very bottom, we do also have the inclusion of the boots, which have once again been given a nice brown texture with a wash added over the top. Of course, we do also have the inclusion of the overcoat, which has been sculpted and painted in a rocker green, and once again features some rather nice detailing of stitches and a few buttonholes running around the side. So the suggestion of the cuffs of the jacket as well, painted in a cream colour, and the sculpting of the hands, one of which to hold the sonic screwdriver and the other to hold the chalice accessory. Naturally, due to this figure being a brand new variation of Paul McGann's Doctor, top of the figure we do also have a brand new head sculpt. And I do think that this new head sculpt works rather well. I think it certainly looks like Paul McGann. However, once again, I think that the paint application over the top may be a little bit thick. This is something that is seen quite a lot throughout this era of the character options action figures. Of course, other figures released around this point include the 12th Doctor and the Clara Oswald figure, all of which have very thick paint apps, much like Missy as well. That one's just sprung to mind. Undermine the sculpt underneath and drown out all that lovely detail, and that is prominent on the sculpt for this figure, as nice as it is. We do have some rather sharp detailing around the eyes and the eyebrows, and a subtle paint application on the lips to make them look natural, and the hair as well, including the different curls, which once again have been given a wash over the top. I think especially from the side profile, it definitely looks like Paul McGann, that they managed to in fact release this figure to add to our Classic Series collections. And I also love that out of all of the 5.5 Collector Series figures released around this time, the Night of the Doctor 8th Doctor figure was the one that was most sought after by fans, more so than the current Doctor of that time. And I think that that really says something. Probably because Paul McGann was absolutely sublime in that mini episode, and by far was some of the best acting seen throughout the 50th anniversary year of Doctor Who. Figure does also come packaged with the chalice accessory that the 8th Doctor does of course drink out of in the Night of the Doctor to trigger his regeneration into the War Doctor. This has some detailing in the sculpt itself, along with a hollow top piece where he can of course drink from, as well as a wash added over the top to give it a metal appearance. The 8th Doctor does also come accompanied with his sonic screwdriver, which is in fact a brand new sculpt, featuring the paint application of a golden section near the bottom, as well as the red emitter. And the 8th Doctor does also come with the bandolier accessory that he does of course get from Cass within the Night of the Doctor story, that would of course later become a part of the War Doctor's costume. Overall, the Night of the Doctor 8th Doctor figure is a lovely variant and a great costume to add to your Classic Series 8th Doctor collection, and I highly recommend tracking it down if you haven't already. This figure is without a doubt one of the best character option sculpts which have been released in recent years. I recall 2015 being a rather bland period for classic Doctor Who action figures. In fact, this entire episode has pretty much covered the end of the 50th anniversary into 2014 and 2015 wrapped into one, seeing pretty much re-release after re-release, but also the occasional gem in there as well, like the Night of the Doctor 8th Doctor. However, 2015 marks the beginning of what we now know as the genesis of the second line of classic action figures, as the classic incarnations of the Doctor, accompanied by the many monsters and villains of 1963 to 1996 Doctor Who, land on a mysterious planet with a mysterious glowing light in the distance, and as they edge closer, the light reads the mighty words of B&M. That said, the first set is in fact not particularly that exciting. It's the B&M exclusive 4th Doctor Adventure set, and for those of us that have collected the line for years previous, this set contains some more rather subtle variants. First off, we have the 4th Doctor, as portrayed by Tom Baker, this time round from the Season 17 story, The City of Death, released with the better scarf from the City of Death collector set, with some very similar paint application to that of the original release. If you look closely, it could be possible that there is some ever so slight paint application changes to the face, now featuring lighter lips as well as a slightly less detailed eye paint application, and of course the most obvious difference is now the absence of the pin badge depicting the palette of paint along with the paintbrush seen on the original City of Death collector set release, and is arguably one of the major benefits of that original figure, as the original Destiny of the Daleks version of that costume also didn't have the badge present. Next up, we return to our good old robot friend D84, originally released at the very beginning of the classic action figure line within Wave 1. Again, this figure is pretty much exactly the same to the original release, accompanied even with his accessory of a severed Vok robot head on a stick, because who wouldn't want one of those to add to the shelf? The only main difference being the label that reads D84 is in fact now printed onto the figure itself and isn't a small flexible label, which in fact more than often did drop off the figure in the first place, so this is no doubt a welcome change. The third and final figure of the set is the deadly assassin incarnation of the Master, now with a grey wash applied over the top of the costume to bring out the further details of the ragged robes that he wore throughout the story, and of course the most obvious difference being the absence of the sash of Rassilon. Of course he didn't in fact wear the sash for the vast majority of the episode, so this change in fact is rather valid. He also comes packaged with his gun accessory. This set was a good opportunity to get classic Doctor Who action figures at an affordable price for the first time in a number of years, and of course the next episode as a part of this series will be returning to the B&M line of exclusive action figures, however this time round on a more permanent basis. As this series is presenting the timeline of Doctor Who Classic Series action figures, it is also worth mentioning at this point that there was a re-release of the Wave 1 4th Doctor from Doctor Who Season 12. Once again, this figure was packaged with the swappable head and sonic screwdriver, and the sculpt itself, as well as the paint application, is virtually identical to the original Wave 1 4th Doctor release. However, the noticeable difference is of course that it is now packaged within the diamond design of packaging, with the 50th anniversary logo, unlike the original Wave 1 4th Doctor, which was of course packaged in the original packaging design with the Russell T Davies logo. This was an American release as opposed to a UK release. I don't think that it ever in fact found its way over to the UK after the original American release, and no doubt the main reason for the figure's release over there was to generate interest with the classic series of Doctor Who action figures, and out of all of the Doctors, probably the 4th Doctor will be the one to generate the most interest, being one of the most popular incarnations of the Doctor of all time. Whilst we are on the subject of USA re-releases, we have another familiar figure making a return. The 4th Doctor regenerated from the Season 12 opening story, Robot. For the most part, this figure remains similar to the initial time capsule release previously covered throughout this series, with the glossy black lapel paint application and the darker trousers. The frilled shirt remains cravatless and has been painted in an ever so slightly different shade to the original version. The biggest change is the alteration in the head. The new capsule head has now been removed and the regular Wave 1 head has been stuck on top. This has a slight change in paint apps once again, with the original Wave 1 version having more standard paint application. This one has a golden wash applied over the top of the curls within the hair, bringing out some further details. However, other than that, it's not particularly too exciting. Unlike the Wave 1 4th Doctor re-release, due to this figure having a number of different changes compared to the one released as a part of the 4th Doctor time capsule in the UK, there was some attention from UK customers. Therefore, this product did in fact reach eventually Amazon in the UK, and a number of stock were available to purchase. However, for around a recommended retail for £30, and to be honest, once again, this is another one of those figures that had a rather steep price tag, and it wasn't particularly worth purchasing in my own opinion, and it's definitely one of those products for more dedicated collectors. We have, you guessed it, another variant of the 4th Doctor that has already been covered as a part of this series. This time round it is the 4th Doctor from the Season 13 story, The Pyramids of Mars, with Computer Bank Device. Now this figure is once again exactly the same, with exactly the same sculpt and paint apps to the original version. However, this time round it is not a UK release, it is a USA release, and the only major difference is that it is packaged within the 50th anniversary diamond design packaging with the more up-to-date logo at the very top, as opposed to the original Russell T Davies logo seen on the UK release, and other than that there's nothing worth talking about. In 2016, after quite a few years of having absolutely no classic series action figure releases that were absolutely brand new sculpts, Character Options decided to do a little bit of a rebrand of the Doctor Who action figure line, launching the now more commonly known as 5.5 scale collector series. Now, although this series has been pretty much 5.5 inch since its very beginning, the collector series was an attempt to kind of revamp the series and create some brand new action Action figures that did solely focused around new series Doctor Who, having re-releases of the 12th Doctor in many different shirts, as well as of course Clara Oswald along with the Missy figure as well, and the curator from the 50th anniversary. However, we did also see another Doctor set released, being the 13 Doctors set, featuring all the different incarnations of the Doctor up until the 12th incarnation, also including the War Doctor as portrayed by John Hurt. Now this set did in fact spread a little bit of trouble throughout the Doctor Who community, simply because it was first launched, I do believe, at San Diego Comic-Con in America, and it was as a result in American shops for quite a large number of months, and then I do believe around the later half of 2016, around the winter period, we finally got to see this product actually released in the UK. However, even then I believe it was a Toys R Us exclusive, and the number of products that were actually released within the UK market was very slim indeed from what I can recall, and in fact I needed to ship for this product from America because all of my local Toys R Us stores in fact sold out of this product almost instantly. So much like the previous large character options sets, this does come up with the rather large TARDIS door design with all your insignia at the very bottom. And opening the product to take a look on the inside, once again it does of course have a presentation of all of the different incarnations of the Doctor, along with information running down the side. Rather handily, the sides of the box do feature a series of images along with the dates of every single incarnation of the Doctor and who acted as that character, alongside a few details stating what episode the figures are apparently from. Now, unusually, a number of these are in fact a little bit incorrect, such as, for an example, the 6th Doctor is apparently from real time. However, of course, if you've been watching this series since the very beginning, you'll know that the SDCC figure of 2009 was indeed the 6th Doctor from real time and not the figure from this set. In fact, the product from this set is the 6th Doctor as seen on the Big Finish audio drama covers. And of course this does also continue on the opposite side of the lid, featuring the new series incarnations of the Doctor. This set was a limited edition to 4,000 units, and it's really nice to see that this set has been individually numbered, mine of which being 2,392, and this is really nicely presented on a Gallifreyan style silver sticker. So here we have all of the 13 Doctors out of the box. Now really, in theory, this set isn't really anything too exciting, because all of these figures have been released before. None of the figures are brand new, unlike with the 11 Doctors set. You had the incentive of having the brand new release of the 8th Doctor. All of the sculpts within this set have been used before, and to be honest, all of them pretty much remain exactly the same bodies from the other releases. No parts have been retooled, or there isn't any combinations between two different figures or anything like that. It is just a series of basic repaints. However, all of the repaints within this set are rather interesting because they've decided to go with what they call a naturalistic colour palette, making for some rather interesting variants that have quite a variety of different colours compared to their original counterparts. Now, I have owned this set since 2016, and for the most part I keep it in the box when on display, and in fact I've only had this set out of the box about 4 times. Therefore, whilst it is out, here's just a look at the new series Doctors, because I don't really have them out of the box much. And to be honest, out of all the figures in the sets, the new series Doctors are certainly the most disappointing figures, and the more interesting figures lie within the classic series incarnations. So the first Doctor figure of the set is a rather unusual one, because this time round we have the first Doctor from the Web Planet. Now, due to the entirety of his era being in black and white, it is very hard to tell some of the intricate details of his costume. Therefore, Character Options have gone rather creative with this variant and decided to do a brown colour scheme, much different to the other first Doctor figures. Of course, the most part, the sculpt is exactly the same to the original Hartnell figure. However, the paint application on the head this time round is a little bit of a revised design, with a few intricate details on the face, including the pink lines, as well as a much darker colour palette on the hair. This time round the wig has been given a darker grey colour scheme with a lighter grey added over the top. Taking a look at the actual costume itself and moving down to the waistcoat, this time round, and rather unusually, we have a brown waistcoat pattern added over the top of this. We have the inclusion of the monocle, and we also have the detailing of the cravat painted a bright white and black lines added over the top. And as for the trousers, this time round they've been painted a light brown, very different to the other Hartnell figures, and we have this intricate darker brown cubic design added over the top. And then at the very bottom of the design of the figure, we have some brown shoes with some white spats. In a rather similar manner to that of the first Doctor, the second Doctor has a rather similar adjustment to the paint application on the hair. Once again, this time round using a darker colour palette, however with a lighter design added over the top, and once again there is a really lovely likeness to that of Patrick Troughton. Moving down to the costume, we have a much more matte design on the coat, and once again exactly the same detailing does remain, light blue added to the shirt, and a darker bow tie. Most eye-catching piece of detail that has been revised in the inclusion of the detailing on the handkerchief. This time round a lighter pink colour, a red swish design added over the top that is very different to the other handkerchiefs that we've seen on previous second Doctor figures. Moving down to the lower half of the costume, of course we once again have a lighter green design added to the trousers with a darker checkered design added over the top of this, and this is of course to replicate the look of the second Doctor from the sixth Doctor story, The Two Doctors. The third Doctor now, as portrayed by John Pertwee, exactly the same base sculpt to all of the other third Doctor figures. However, this time round we have the third Doctor's costume as seen throughout the Time Monster. Some slight revisions have been made once again to the likeness and the paint application around the eyes as well as the hair. However, the most major difference is the inclusion of a red blazer that has been given a rather lovely highlight over the top, including the detailing of black lines around the lapels and the inclusion of the button detailing. This figure uses a sculpt of the frilled shirt and a black tie added over the top of this, which is different to the upcoming release of the B&M exclusive third Doctor figure from Three Doctors, and the remainder of the figure itself has your usual third Doctor legs along with some glossy black shoes. Following quite a lot of requests to see a re-release of the Season 18 4th Doctor after the original becoming rather rare, we do have another Season 18 4th Doctor. However, unfortunately this set was also fairly rare, meaning that once again this figure still remains quite hard to get. However, this costume is absolutely gorgeous. It's by far one of my favourite figures of the set, and much like all the other incarnations so far, we do feature lots of revisions to the paint application, including a nice highlight that held hair sculpt, as well as a change to the colour palette on the costume itself. This time round we have a few alterations to the scarf, given a much more darker colour scheme, including a few really lovely patterns on this, including some much more intricate lines, as well as a darker burgundy pattern at the very bottom, including the tassels of the scarf itself. However, of course, removing this to take a look at the costume, very much following a similar theme to the scarf, a much darker burgundy coat this time round. I really love the inclusion of the highlights on the shoulder pads, as well as the paint application on the buttons on the trench coat itself. This does of course move all the way down to the bottom, using exactly the same sculpt to the original version. See, we do also have the inclusion of the shirt underneath this, which has been given a much more dirty green application compared to the original version, which was a much more vibrant white. And then of course the back of the figure once again follows exactly the same colour scheme, featuring the much darker burgundy paint apps. One of my personal favourite figures of the set, and certainly one of my personal favourite 4th Doctor costumes. Peter Davison 5th Doctor figure now, this time round apparently from The Awakening, which is a rather unusual choice in story, however a nice variation nevertheless. The colour scheme on this figure is in fact rather similar to the B&M 2019 5th Doctor, featuring this time round a much darker overcoat along with a orangey piping design as opposed to the usual red. As you can see, we have a salmon pink design on the trousers, as well as a very dirty application there on the shoes themselves. We do also have the inclusion of the jumper, which has been given once again a much darker paint colour wrap, especially on the red arrowed sections, and we do also have, as per usual, the inclusion of the celery, has been given a darker wash added over the top, as well as a few slight adjustments to the likeness to Peter Davison, once again with a wash added over the hair to really emphasise those highlights. To be honest, it's quite a nice variant, and certainly one of the best 5th Doctor figures that have been released over the many years. And then we have the figure of the set that makes the hard tracking down incredibly worth it, because it is the 6th Doctor from the Big Finish audio drama covers. And I'm not just saying this because I am a massive fan of Colin, but this figure is genuinely the best figure of the set. The costume is absolutely beautiful, following exactly the same design to that of the TV version of the 6th Doctor. However, all of the colours this time round have been swapped out to have a blue scale theme compared to that of the many colours of the TV show costume. costume. It's an absolutely gorgeous figure. We have the inclusion of the darker cravat in the very middle. It has been also given a black splodge design, as well as some blue question marks. The waistcoat has been really sharply painted, featuring different shades of blue, along with the highlight of a golden chain around this. Towards the side of the coat itself, we also have the inclusion of the cat badge, which is one of the only things on this costume that isn't in fact blue. A series of paint applications to make it ever so vaguely look like a ginger cat. As for the actual coat itself, this is once again brilliant. A really lovely sharp design featuring lots of different shades of blue, especially on this collar section at the very top, and this design continues to be incredibly impressive on the very back. Have all the different sections that you would come to expect on the normal TV show coat. However, this time round we have loads of blue designs that have been added over the top of this, including diagonal stripes, black lines, and of course many different shades of blue. So included is a lined design on the cuffs of the coat itself, which also follow a rather similar pattern on the trousers of the figure, which were of course once yellow. However, now they are a much more dark blue design with a black pinstripe added over the top of this, and as you would expect, the shoes at the bottom are of course blue. The figure is absolutely gorgeous and is the first ever Character Options Big Finish action figure release, which is brilliant to be able to add to the collection, and a lovely variant from the real-time 6th Doctor, which is also a lovely figure. The 7th Doctor figure of the set this time round is from Ghostlight. Now this is a lovely example of an action figure that is using this naturalistic skin tone in a really effective manner, and to be honest I underestimated this figure when it was originally announced, and once again it's one of my favourite ones from the entirety of this set because I just love the changes within the colour palette on the costume itself. Once again we have a few adjustments to the paint application on the head to make it look more like Sylvester McCoy, and we do also have a few upgrades to the actual costume itself. Finally, we have a silver chain on the collar, which is linking to the pocket, which a lot of classic series fans have been wanting for many years, that we never got to see on any of the other Forbidden Planet exclusive 7th Doctors, so it's nice to finally see that updated. We do also have a few adjustments to the colour scheme on the checkered jumper, as well as a gorgeous colour design that has been used on the scarf, this time round with a green highlight added over the top, which is also prominent on the handkerchief hanging out of the 7th Doctor's pocket. And then of course on the bottom of the costume we have the inclusion of the 7th Doctor's trousers, which this time round once again have been given a much more intricate and sharper colour scheme, including lots of details of checkers, lighter green and red lines that have been added over the top of this, bringing out those sharper details. And then of course at the very bottom we also have the inclusion of the light brown trousers shoes that have been highlighted with a white spat. And the final classic series incarnation of the Doctor for this set is of course Paul McGann, this time round a variant from his childhood where he's suffering from serious acne. It isn't of course that, it is the Night of the Doctor, 8th Doctor, but this time round with damage to his face, much like how he did have throughout the majority of the mini-sode. Of course at the point of this release, this was a rather recent sculpt, having been released as a part of the 5.5 collector series, I do believe pretty much around exactly the same time. However, I suppose it's a nice variant and one of the only changes that they could make to this costume, really, given that we didn't really see it on screen for long. So naturally we have that design that has been added to the face with quite a lot of splodges on there. Costume for the most part, this remains pretty similar to the other 8th Doctor figure. However, as you will notice, there is a weathered design that has been added over the top of the coat, which personally I think really adds something to this figure. I did always think the original did look a little bit too new when it came to the actual coat itself, so I think that this weathering brings out that war-torn design and does certainly look very effective. And as per usual at the very bottom we do also have a wash that has been added to the shoes as well, and other than that a really impressive amount of detailing on the costume for what already is a rather impressive and effective 8th Doctor variant. And that is the 13 Doctors set. I can recall when this was originally announced, people were absolutely ecstatic by it. They were really excited to finally be able to have all of the Doctors, all the current Doctors at least, within their collection. And I can recall not really being that fussed. I'd just seen it for what it was, the same Doctor figures released again, just with an updated colour scheme, and I didn't really get where all the hype was coming from. However, I never seen this product in stores. I think I in fact seen it once in the Who shop, because it was for sale at around £300 and it was never going to be on sale in the UK and it was going to remain an American exclusive. However, I think I knew by that point it was coming out in Toys R Us, an exclusive later on in the year, so of course I never paid that mad price for it. And I can recall at that point actually thinking, no, these figures actually look pretty decent. And then when I went and paid the import charges for this product, which thankfully weren't in fact that much more expensive than the recommended retail of this set over here, that I do believe was around £100, which I was quite shocked by once again. I thought it was in fact going to be a little bit more. I was pleasantly surprised. When I opened this product, I thought that all the variants were really nice, all of which had very sharp detailing, and all of them were very impressive in their own way. Even the 5th Doctor figure that previously I've not been that fussed by was quite a nice variant and featured a nice and almost satisfying set of colours. The 6th Doctor, 4th Doctor and 7th Doctor are absolutely gorgeous and make this set worth it alone. They are by far some of my favourite colour schemes of these Doctor figures to ever be released to date. So naturally, if you get the opportunity to purchase this set at a decent price, I certainly recommend doing so. It comes in a lovely presentation box. However, at the current time of filming, I do believe the average price for this set is around £160 and upwards. At least that is what eBay is currently telling me. So you might be able to get it for cheaper. Who knows? If there's one particular figure in this set that you would like to buy, I do believe that quite a lot of sellers in fact sell them all singly on eBay anyway for around £25 to £30 each, which in the case of these three, I'd actually recommend it, especially if you are an eager fan of those incarnations. And that concludes the 13th episode of Doctor Who, the classic series action figures A History. I really hope you have enjoyed it. I think that this episode kind of marks the end of a certain period with Doctor Who merchandising history. We have the Sound Effects Daleks range almost bringing to a close the Forbidden Planet exclusive series, along with the variant of Ace from Silver Nemesis, which was pretty much the last definitive Forbidden Planet exclusive. And then of course within the later half of this episode we had a large focus on the 13 Doctors set, which again was kind of the end of an era for Doctor Who merchandising, as that is the last figure collector set that has been released to feature all the different incarnations of classic series Doctor, and from that point onwards we've gone down to have more smaller scale collector sets with more re-releases and more repaints. So moving forward to episodes 14 and 15 as a part of this series, we delve into the world of the B&M exclusive action figure line, as every release from this point onwards is a B&M exclusive, which I kind of think shows how far we are to the end of this series, in fact, coming to a close with episode 15. So we are so close to the end. However, not just yet, as we've got many different variants of classic series TARDIS to take a look at, lots of different variants of Doctor, and of course almost the regeneration of the classic series line, with the brand new head sculpts of Doctor Who classic series companions starting to make an appearance within the B&M exclusive series from 2019 onwards. So as per usual, I hope you have enjoyed this episode, and do of course stay tuned on the Host Productions for brand new Doctor Who content each and every week, from Big Finish audio dramas, merchandise and much more. So thanks for watching, and I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.